Have you ever felt the air grow heavy with anticipation, as though the very veil between flesh and shadow quivers at your touch? In the Testament of Solomon, you stand within a circle traced in silver dust, incense curling like living serpents around your feet, and summon Onoskelis, part woman, part demon, her thighs bristling with venomous barb, her cloven goat hooves dripping corruption with every step. What dreadful secret lurks beneath that once beautiful face, now scarred by ancient anguish? What unholy power compels her to spread plague and lust in equal measure, sowing spiritual leprosy that first scorches the heart before it festers the flesh? Imagine Solomon's hand steel steady with God's seal as he commands this beguiling specter to speak. At first, her defiance crackles in the hush, ragged, raw, ungovernable, until divine chains force her confession, tales of nooses laid in moonlit groves of minds, ensnared by desires they cannot name, and of the venom she welds from the hidden wounds of human longing. Can you feel the chill of her admission stirring in your veins? If you dare to peel back the scales of Onoskelis' venomous lore, her origins in abandoned echoes, her methods of seduction and destruction, type 777 in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more journeying into Scripture's darkest mysteries. Trust me, the revelations that lie ahead will linger long after the candlelight fades. Sex scars and scourges Onoskelis, the scorpion demon's lustful blight. You stand within Solomon's circle, incense smoke curling like living serpents around the seal drawn in silver dust, and summon a spirit whose very name sends shivers across the boundaries of flesh, Onoskelis. In the Testament of Solomon, she is described only briefly, yet her story chills more deeply than any nightshade's bite. Imagine the moment the air ripples before you, a shape coalesces at the edge of candlelight half hidden by shadow. Even before she speaks, you sense her defiance, ragged, raw, ungovernable. Solomon's original encounter paints her as a creature of contradiction, part woman, part demon, whose thighs are sheathed in venomous bristles and whose feet end in cloven goat hooves, so that every step drips corruption. Yet she bears the features of a woman, a face that might once have smiled, eyes that flicker with ancient anguish. What torments a soul so twisted that she must walk upon stings? In the Testament, Solomon commands her answer, and this is what he learns. Onoskelis is the architect of plague upon those who yield to temptation, the whisperer of lust that disfigures body and spirit alike. Her presence breeds boils and gangrene, a spiritual leprosy that burns the heart before it festers the flesh. Those who fall under her shadow find themselves consumed by shame, for as she walks among men, Solomon records, so she sows in their souls the seeds of uncontrollable desire, which eat away at their conscience. Can you feel that insidious hunger stirring in your own veins as you stand here now? As the demonic queen of want, she refuses to reveal the names of her cohorts. Each question Solomon presses her with, "Where do you roam? What pact have you forged?" She answers only with bitter laughter, her voice like nails scraped across tombstone marble. Yet, when she finally speaks of her origin, it is with a weariness that echoes in your bones. "I was once one of light," she confesses, "but I stretched forth my foot into sin, and the Most High cast me down. Now I walk the borderlands of flesh unmade and remade by the lust of mortal hearts." In this moment, Onias reveals himself for what he truly is, a skulking traitor to his own dark lineage. Once he had swaggered amid the infernal ranks, his claws dripping malevolence. Now he cowers before Solomon's command, so utterly broken that even Michael's signet ring feels less like a shackle and more like a shield against the king's wrath. Though that silver seal once fastened Onias in unyielding chains, the demon no longer frets over its binding power. He merely trembles at Solomon's voice, obeying with quivering limbs. What strikes us most is how Solomon, guided by the radiant archangel Uriel, has wrought this transformation. Uriel's light did more than compel obedience. It shattered Onias's resolve, extinguishing every spark of infernal pride. Bound no longer by fear of the ring, but by dread of the king's judgment, Onias finds himself tasked with the unthinkable, to hunt down and ensnare the very prince of demons Beelzebub and deliver him to Solomon's throne. Imagine the horror stirring in Onias's chest, more terror even than the dread he once felt before Beelzebub's throne of flies. Clutching the ring that once served as his prison, Onias raises it toward the swirling mists where Beelzebub lurks. His voice cracks as he summons, "Hither Solomon calls thee again." Those two words hang heavy in the air, a cruel echo of command and betrayal. For in that call, Onias stands not as a demon among demons, but as a broken herald of celestial authority, leading the unclean king himself into the lion's den. Have you ever felt the sting of betrayal so acute that even your own power seems poisoned? Onias knows that sting well now. He uses Michael's ring, the instrument of his own fall, as both lure and leash, a cruel mockery of the freedom he once arrogantly claimed. He marches forward, each step a testament to his newfound subservience, dragging Beelzebub by force of divine will rather than infernal might. What must Beelzebub's fury be like to see a fellow demon fallen so low? How does an arch-prince of hell endure the indignity of a ring meant to humble only the weakest of spirits? As Onias guides the bound prince through Solomon's marble halls, the contrast could not be starker. One once reveled in the groans of plague, the other now quivers beneath a mortal's gaze. And at Solomon's command, that mortal steers the course of hell itself. A hush falls as the two demons appear before him, Beelzebub's winged form beaten down, Onias's shoulders stooped under unseen weight. Solomon lifts his eyes, and with unspeakable authority proclaims, "Blessed be the Lord God Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, who has given Solomon wisdom beyond measure, and has subjected the power of demons beneath my hand." Beelzebub's defiance flickered for only an instant before Onias acted. The demon prince, so long accustomed to bowing only before hell's own throne, sneered through tormented eyes and spat, "Tell me, who is this Solomon of whom thou speakest?" But Onias, his spirit hollowed by defeat, offered no reply. Instead, with trembling urgency, he stripped the signet ring from Beelzebub's swollen finger and slipped it onto his own. In that moment, the archdemon found himself ensnared by the very power he once wielded. Michael's sigil now shone against his flesh like a brand of shame. Imagine the shock coursing through Beelzebub's vast frame as the celestial seal ignited, binding him in unbreakable chains of light. It was the precise torment Onias had endured, an experience meant to crush pride and compel obedience, and now the ex-arch knelt under the same crushing weight. No thrones of flies, no legions at his command. Nothing remained but the cold stone beneath him and the silent gaze of the human who led him. Bound as Onias once was, the mighty Beelzebub could only follow where faithless Onias led, limping through echoing corridors toward Solomon's throne. When the two emerged into the brilliantly lit hall, the assembled court fell into awed silence. Lamps glowed upon polished marble. The air thrummed with expectancy. Solomon, clad in regal vestments embroidered with gold, rose to his feet, and a hush fell over even the angels at his side. "And when I saw the prince of demons," Solomon recalled later, "I glorified the Lord God, maker of heaven and earth." His voice rang out like trumpets at dawn. "Blessed art thou, Lord God Almighty, who hast given to Solomon thy servant wisdom, the assessor of the wise, and hast subjected unto me all the power of the devil." That praise lifted heavenward, hung like a benediction, before Solomon turned his gaze to the bound prince. With the same calm authority, he had used on Onias, he asked the simplest yet most devastating question, "Who art thou?" The silence stretched until Beelzebub's chained wrists scraped the stone floor. Then in a voice heavy with ancient pride and humbled reluctance, he answered, "I am Beelzebub, the ex-arch of the demons, and all the infernal legions have their chief seats close to me. 'Tis I who make manifest the apparition of each demon in this world. Pause and consider the one who summons plagues, nightmares, and whispered temptations, confessed his name, unmoved, for Solomon's ring, silenced every lie. What would it feel like to hold absolute power and yet find yourself helpless under a mere mortal's decree? And what secrets lie hidden behind those veils of dust and shadow, now that Solomon commands the master of illusions itself? In that exchange, Solomon uncovered a truth almost too vast to fathom. Beelzebub, once hailed as Lord of Flies, stands at the apex of all infernal ranks. Every demon, every unclean spirit that walks the earth in shadow or whisper owes its command to him. He is the great conductor of hell's orchestra, summoning each fiend at his whim and casting them across the world to sow chaos and temptation. Can you imagine the weight of such authority? An empire woven from fear and deceit, yet now shackled before a mortal king. Driven by an insatiable thirst for knowledge, Solomon's quest was never mere spectacle, but a solemn mission to pierce the veil of darkness. He pressed Beelzebub further. "Bring before me," he commanded, voice echoing like thunder through the vaulted hall, "all the unclean spirits that serve under your scepter, that I may question them and learn the depth of their wicked devices." The gathered throng gasped, for no human had ever dared to demand such a thing. And then, as if intoxicated by the sheer scope of his triumph, Solomon allowed a flicker of earthly curiosity to sparkle in his eyes. "Igor, Nia, female demons, are any of your legions she-spirits?" he asked, his tone unashamedly inquisitive, seeking not impurity, but understanding. The question hung in the heavy air, a bridge between divine investigation and human wonder. Beelzebub's response was a slow, sly wink that sent a ripple through the assembly, a gesture both mocking and conspiratorial, as though the prince of hell reveled in Solomon's audacity. "Ah," Beelzebub purred, voice rich with dark amusement. "You pierce deeper than most, O king. Yes, there are daughters of the abyss, unseen architects of temptation, whose touch is as lethal as their beauty." With that cryptic promise, he turned on his heel, guided by Onias's trembling hand, and descended into the bowels of the underworld itself. Moments later, he re-emerged bearing a figure shrouded in midnight mist and crowned shadows, a female demon whose very silence was a challenge. Her name was Onoskelis, the scorpion's bride, a creature said to weave both venom and seduction in equal measure. She moved with an otherworldly grace, each step leaving scorch marks on the marble floor, her eyes glinting like the coals of eternal fire. In that moment, the air itself seemed to pause as Onoskelis stepped into Solomon's presence. Though bound by celestial command, she carried the grace of a high-born lady, her skin gleaming like the marble of the temple courts, each curve perfectly hewn, as though carved by divine artisans. Long hair darker than midnight oil fell in rippling waves down her back, and with a single toss, she seemed to set invisible fires dancing in the eyes of every watcher. Can you feel the electric charge of her entrance, as if every breath drawn was laced with both wonder and danger? Yet Solomon, whose sight had pierced shadows and stripped devils of disguise, remained unmoved by her charms. Some scholars whisper that Onoskelis bore the limbs of a mule, legs supple and muscled ending in hooves that clacked against the floor like a heartbeat in the stillness. But whether human or half-beast, she knew well the art of temptation. Like the strange woman of folly in Proverbs 7:10, who seized him and kissed him. She leaned forward, lips curved in invitation, eyes gleaming with hidden promise. What would you have done if she beckoned you with that knowing smile? Holding the sigil ring in his hand, a symbol of heaven's authority, Solomon commanded the hall to silence. Then, with the authority of one who questions the very engines of darkness, he asked the question every demon dreads, "Tell me, who art thou?" The hush that followed was heavier than any storm. Onoskelis met his gaze without flinching, and replied, her voice a melody threaded through the iron of hammers. "I am called Onoskelis, a spirit wrought of Saturn. Looking upon the earth, there lies a golden cave where I live, but I have a place that never shifts." Consider for a moment the weight behind Onoskelis' own description, a spirit wrought of Saturn. What does it mean when a creature of shadows claims kinship with the very force of cosmic restraint? In the lore of the stars, Saturn is known as the stern taskmaster of the heavens, the planet that binds orbits and measures the turning of time. It is written in Ecclesiastes 3:1 that to everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven, and it is Saturn who enforces that divine timetable, setting boundaries and teaching souls the lessons of patience and self-control. Yet, here stands Onoskelis, seductive, capricious, untamed, declaring herself born of the very planet that demands order. How can these opposing truths coexist within one being? Perhaps the answer lies in the paradox of Saturn's dominion. Under its rule, we learn to temper ambition with caution, to structure desire rather than let it run rampant. But what happens when a spirit fashioned by those rigid energies rejects the lesson and instead wears limitation like a cloak to mock restraint? Onoskelis' impulsiveness may well be the echo of Saturn's own power, twisted into rebellion. Where Saturn says wait, she whispers come. Where Saturn builds walls, she shows you how to climb them, questioning not only the rules, but the very authority that laid them down. Imagine the tension in Solomon's court as this revelation dawned the king, whose wisdom had no equal, now facing a creature embodying the tension between order and anarchy. Would you feel the pull of her presence, the magnetic allure of chaos dressed in the guise of cosmic law? And why, of all the demons, did she invoke Saturn's name, a name revered by astrologers for its solemn justice and unyielding boundaries? Some scholars have suggested that Onoskelis, by claiming Saturn's heritage, was hinting at her own dual nature, capable of great structure, guiding hidden knowledge, carving secret temples of gold in the earth's veins, yet equally capable of tearing down that very structure with a single glance. In Isaiah 45:7, we read, "I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil," a reminder that divine forces often wield both order and upheaval. Is Onoskelis then a dark counterpart to that truth, a being forged in limitation, only to become its living contradiction? As Solomon listened, the air must have crackled with unspoken questions. What does it mean to be crafted by restraint and yet choose rebellion? Does her origin grant her mastery over boundaries, allowing her to transcend them at will? And if she can outflank Saturn itself, what hope remains for mortal souls seeking guidance under that same star? Imagine Onoskelis invoking not the planet, but the ancient god, Saturn himself, the Roman counterpart of the Greek titan Cronus, whose very myth reeks of violence and betrayal. Recall how Cronus, born of Gaia's anguish, was entrusted with a sickle to free his siblings from their father. Uranus's cruel prison, birthed only to be swallowed whole at his father's violent command. Can you feel the thunder in that tale? Gaia's gift of the sickle toppled one tyranny only for Cronus to seize power by devouring his own offspring, desperate to thwart the prophecy that one of them would rise against him. What must it be like, Onoskelis hints to carry within you the memory of being both child and victim, born to inherit the world yet condemned to be unmade? As we ponder her words, a spirit wrought of Saturn, we must ask, does she claim descent from those swallowed souls, a daughter of the Titan cast into darkness before she could see the sky? If Zeus could carve open Cronus's belly and release his siblings, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, might Onoskelis stand among those reborn, a hidden Olympian among demons? Or is her bond to Saturn a darker reflection, a promise that every spark of rebellion carries the stain of ancestral violence? The scriptures remind us of cycles of swallowing and regurgitation. Jeremiah 18:6 speaks of the potter shaping then reshaping clay at God's will. And so perhaps Saturn's grim legacy is mirrored in every soul called to be remade. What if Onoskelis's boast is not of cosmic alignment, but of ancient defiance, that she wears the scars of myth's first rebellion in her every movement? And if her origin is as tangled as the Titan's own fate, how could Solomon hope to untangle her truth without being ensnared in those same primordial chains? We may never fully unravel why Onoskelis invokes Saturn's name, whether she was one of those devoured children seeking vengeance, a sliver of the Olympian chorus, or simply a demon who adopts the Titan's terror as her own badge of honor. What remains certain is that in her claim lies a riddle as old as time, a riddle Solomon must solve if he is to pierce the veil of primeval power that binds gods and demons alike. Imagine standing at the edge of a sun-drenched cliff, the wind carrying a faint whisper of silk against skin, only to realize that voice belongs to Onoskelis herself. Solomon's record tells us that she casts her gaze across the world and makes her home in a cavern of living gold, its walls gleaming with an otherworldly light that seems to pulse like a heartbeat. Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to step inside such a place, its floors warm beneath your feet, the air rich with the scent of something ancient and untamed? But don't be fooled by the promise of splendor. Solomon's account reveals that Onoskelis is a master of transformation. One moment she stands before you in the shape of the fairest woman, every contour sculpted with impossible perfection. The next, her form flickers, shifting like a mirage, until the skin smooths into something unrecognizable. Why does she cloak herself in beauty only to twist it at will? Could it be that her very essence is change, an echo of the serpent that shed its skin in the Garden of Eden? Genesis 3:1. Her shape-shifting is not mere spectacle, but a weapon of lure. Solomon heard her confession. At one time, I strangle men with a noose. At another, I creep up from the undergrowth to their arms. Picture a gentle trail through a forest, birdsong overhead, sunlight dappling the leaves, and then her shadow slides between the trees, a silent loop of rope in hand, ready to draw tight around the unexpecting traveler. How many pilgrims, guides, or shepherds did she ensnare simply by taking the form they trusted most? Yet that is not all. She boasts of her favorite haunts, the crumbling precipices where eagles dare not nest, hidden caverns, carved by forgotten rivers and ravines so deep that sunlight never touches their floors. Here on the ragged lip of the earth she waits. Have you ever peered over a sheer drop, heart pounding, and wondered if something unseen watched you from below? That is her domain, places where the ground can betray you and the darkness swallow you whole. The most chilling truth of all is her power over the mind. Solomon's pages whisper that she lures men into her clutches and strangles them with a noose. But an even darker note follows. Some never feel the rope around their necks, because under her twisted influence, they hang themselves by their own hands. Is this cruelty beyond measure, or a cruel reflection of our own despair given form, could a single glance from her golden cavern be enough to tip the fragile balance of hope? In Job 9:18 we read, "God does not repress anger. Even the cohorts of Rahab cower before him. Yet here stands a creature who bends fear to her will and makes mortality her playground." If you found yourself alone on a moonlit ledge, just as her laughter echoed through the stones, would you dare to move? Would you even recognize the world you once knew? Solomon's narrative stops short of revealing how he confronted her final gambit, but the warning remains. Beauty can be a snare, golden caverns a trap, and even the gentlest path may lead to a noose. As you tread your own journey through hidden caves of ambition or along cliffs of doubt, ask yourself, where might Onoskelis be waiting? And will you see her shifting form in time to turn back? Imagine you're standing in the cool dusk beneath the half-finished walls of the temple, watching a shadow drift between the pillars, and there she is, Onoskelis, slipping into your vision as a woman more lovely than any you've ever known. Leaning close, she whispers, almost as if sharing a secret only the night and the stars can hear. Often I come to men in this guise, but especially to those whose skin is kissed by the sun. Can you feel the pull of that confession? An admission laced with both invitation and ill intent. She explains, her voice a silken promise. They bear my star upon their brows, these dark-skinned laborers who toil under Soul's fierce gaze. Without realizing it, they worship that very star privately, even openly, yet know not that each prayer they cast only weaves a strand of their own fate. Does this strike you as cruel irony, a warning echoed in Isaiah's words, "Beware, lest thou lift up thy soul unto vanity, and say, the Lord delighteth in thee." Jeremiah 2:25, yet played out here in bronze-skinned form. And when her appetite for mischief grows, she adds with a sly smile, "For those who seek wealth through recollection, memory of past bargains, future promises I grant, but a morsel of coin to those who honor me faithfully." Pause for a moment. What would you give to see your own fortunes change? Would you barter a fragment of your past, a glimmer of forgotten wisdom, in exchange for a taste of her favor? It seems she knows the rhythms of men's desires better than they know themselves. Her preference for the suntanned is not mere caprice but strategy. The laborers, sweating beneath the desert sky, carry the symbol of her power upon their shoulders. Meanwhile, the highborn, including Solomon himself, who linger in shaded chambers, remain untouched by her charms, cloistered in their own importance. Have you ever noticed how those who break their backs under the open sky often bear the deepest scars, both seen and unseen? There is a razor's edge to her generosity, a gift that entangles like fine gold thread. When she supplies a coin fairly, it is never enough. It is a spark that ignites greed, urging the recipient to return again and again to the golden cavern she inhabits. Just as the psalmist declares, "Their silver and gold shall not be able to deliver them in the day of the Lord's wrath." Psalm 37:20. So too does Onoskelis' double-edged kindness reveal the true cost beneath the shine. A breeze stirs the dust around Solomon's feet as Onoskelis steps forward, her laughter a soft echo that seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. She does not address the princes or the priests, but fixes her gaze on the sunburned laborers, those whose skin glows bronze from dawn till dusk. She murmurs, because they are the ones whose hearts crack ever wider beneath the weight of their unseen toil. Have you ever felt that ache for recognition, the desperation that makes a single kind word feel like salvation? For these men, every swing of the hammer and every chisel's scrape is a prayer, unheard a longing that Onoskelis exploits with merciless grace. They share my star, she confesses, voice low enough to feel like a private sin. They honor me without knowledge of their own worship, offering sweat and whispered vows in exchange for a glimmer of comfort. Psalm 10:18 warns, "To do justice to the orphan and oppressed, that the man of the earth may no more oppress." Yet here the oppressed unwittingly bow to a demoness who answers not with mercy, but with gilded chains? Why do we, like those laborers, lean toward that which seems to soothe our wounds, even if it tears at our souls? Onoskelis smiles, and with it comes the faintest rattle of a noose hidden in her skirts. When I wish, she says, I grant them gold just enough to fan the flames of their desire for more. Picture yourself receiving such a gift, a coin pressed into your palm at the end of a brutal day, the weight of it both promise and burden. Would you trace its edge and wonder whose hand had placed it there? Or would you whisper thanks blind to the binding oath you've just made? She traces the arches of her own shifting form, now a woman of radiant beauty, now a shape that defies definition, and confesses her cruel delight. Every prayer they offer, every silent plea for relief, only drives me to deeper mischief. Can you feel the tightening coil of dread in that admission? As she speaks of those precipices, caves, and ravines where she lures men to their doom, you realize the landscape of their fall is carved not only in stone, but in the fragile corners of their own hopes. Before she fades back into the gloom, Onoskelis leans closer, whispering a final warning. They do not know the peril of their worship, nor the price that mercy extracts. In that moment, do you see yourself among them, tempted by a touch of kindness that conceals a tightening noose? And if you were called by her silver tongue, would you dare to answer? Or would you turn away before your own soul became the sacrifice? She leans in the flicker of torchlight dancing across her shifting features and confesses something far more insidious than ropes or blades. They pay me with memory, she whispers, for every thought of me. They cannot dismiss every sleepless night spent replaying my image becomes their currency. Imagine that your own mind turned into a mint, coining endless tributes to her allure. Have you ever found yourself unable to stop thinking about a moment, a face, a promise, until it haunted your every waking hour? That's precisely the kind of tribute she craves. In their obsession, she sees a prize greater than gold, like Judas counted silver for his betrayal. Matthew 26:15. These laborers inadvertently offer her each recollection, each fond or tormented reverie, and though she knows the worship she elicits will lead them away from righteous paths, she cannot resist rewarding them. A coin here, she says, a whispered secret. They're small tokens of her favor, meant to deepen their devotion and tighten her grip on their souls. What would you give for that fleeting taste of power or comfort, a moment's peace, a borrowed smile? Yet every gift carries its own curse. In Scripture, God warns through Ezekiel, they bend their tongues like their bow for lies, but they are not valiant for the truth. Ezekiel 12:6. So it is with Onoskelis' minions, they receive her silver, maybe a sudden windfall or an unexpected kindness, but it binds them all the tighter to her will. Have you ever noticed how the sweetest windfalls often carry the heaviest burdens? Each reward she offers is a contract inked in the heart, a silent vow to return again and again to hone their own destruction. And she smiles at the irony. These men, forgotten by kings and priests alike, believe they've struck a bargain, never realizing that the true cost is the very freedom they sought. In their hunger for relief, they become her chosen children, feeding her power with every beat of memory's drum. So ask yourself if a demoness can fool a man with a gift as small as a coin or as subtle as remembrance. What might you be offering in the dark corners of your own mind without even knowing it? Solomon's brow furrowed as he leaned closer, the flicker of torchlight dancing on the cavern walls. Speak plainly, he commanded. From what unholy womb did you first emerge? Onoskelis allowed a slow, mocking smile to curve her lips. I was born of a voice. Untimely, she murmured, her tone both cryptic and chilling. the so-called echo of a man's order dropping in the wood. Those words hung in the air like a rancid perfume, an answer that offered neither comfort nor clarity. Solomon pressed on, a voice untimely. "Explain yourself." The demoness's eyes glinted as she continued. That voice belonged to Beelzebub, the architect of all our kind, he who summons demons into flesh. But mine was no grand summoning. It was an echo born of filth, the very sound of a man's waist striking leaf and loam. Can you imagine that moment? The casual throwaway of bodily refuse meant to be forgotten, instead rippling through creation and calling Onoskelis into being. Are you saying Solomon demanded that your life sprang from excrement cast aside in the forest? Her laughter was soft and bitter. Yes, from that most loathsome remnant did I take shape. As Psalm 119:136 declares, "Rivers of tears run down my eyes, because people do not keep your law. So my birth was the river of man's contempt, and I rose from it." What does it say about the darkest corners of our world, that a single careless act and echo of disregard can spawn a creature of such seductive horror? Have you ever paused to consider how the refuse of your own shameful moments might return to haunt you? Onoskelis leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. I am the living testament to mankind's discarded curses. Every muttered insult in the night, every hasty oath spat into the wind, all nourish me. Solomon trembled not with fear, but with the weight of understanding. He recalled Scripture's warning in Matthew 12:36. For by your words you will be acquitted, and by your words you will be condemned. Could a single careless syllable indeed birth a demon? As the truth settled between them, Solomon found himself wondering what hidden forces lie dormant in every careless word we utter into the darkness. Solomon leaned forward, eyes narrowing as the flicker of torchlight cast long shadows across Onoskelis' shifting form. Tell me, he commanded, voice low but insistent, which angel most frustrates you in your wicked schemes, which celestial foe strikes at your power. For a moment, the demoness's lips curled into that same slow, sinister smile that had hinted of earlier riddles. She tilted her head hair, cascading like a dark waterfall, and answered in a voice both mocking and elusive, "He that my star is reigning." The court fell silent. Solomon's jaw tightened. Did she dare insult him? Or was this a coded reference to the angel who held dominion over her unholy sphere? In his impatience, Solomon signaled one of his guards. With a swift motion, the soldier's rod cracked against Onoskelis' side, an echo of authority meant to silence her insolence. Yet, even as she recoiled, that mocking smile remained, as though the blow had only deepened her amusement. What could he, that my star is reigning, mean, who among the host of heaven could bend even a demoness born of filth to his will? Some scholars suggest this was no mere taunt, but a veiled name, Joel, the very angel, whose constellations held dominion over her fate, much as Uriel guided Gneas. But the text is frustratingly scant, offering no clear introduction for Joel's role or power. It leaves us with questions. Have you ever felt another's influence so keenly that even your darkest impulses tremble? Which unseen hand guides the forces you cannot command? Solomon, undeterred by her cryptic defiance, lifted his gaze heavenward and praised the Lord. Blessed art thou, O God of Israel, who hast granted me wisdom to discern truths hidden in rebellion and folly. Then, with a wave of his hand, he turned back to Onoskelis. Spin now the finest hemp for the temple's ropes. He ordered that every strand may bind both earth and spirit together. And so the demoness, once a weaver of death, found herself at the loom of creation, her coils of hemp destined not for strangulation, but for the sacred halls of Solomon's design. In that moment, her riddle remained a reminder that even those born of discarded echoes must bow, however briefly, to the will of the Most High. Do you ever wonder which hidden threads in your own life are being spun by forces both seen and unseen? Perhaps the greatest power lies not in the strength of our bonds, but in the divine wisdom with which they are woven. Onoskelis' tactics mirror what later lore would label a succubus, wielding sexual allure as a means of control rather than reproduction. Even though she doesn't thirst for seed, her seduction is no less lethal. She uses desire itself as a trap, drawing her victims into moral and sometimes mortal ruin. It's striking how rare female demons are in those ancient texts. Scripture names angels and impostors, but nearly always in male form. Yet here we glimpse a very different archetype, a spirit who weaponizes the body's deepest longings. What does it say about the world of the Testament of Solomon that this demoness appears at all? Perhaps it reflects the same anxieties that scrawled Lilith into later myth, another Eve figure who refuses to submit, who turns sexual agency into rebellion. Think of Eve in Eden. The woman you gave to be with me, she gave me fruit of the tree, and I ate. Genesis 3:12. Notice how quickly blame shifts, how temptation is gendered. Onoskelis stands in that shadow, but magnified, she doesn't merely challenge a single man's obedience. She sabotages entire workforces, preying on the overtoiled hands and hearts of Solomon's laborers. Have you ever considered how women, both real and imagined, became the embodiment of sin? In a culture where purity was prized and power seldom granted to women, the idea of a female demon must have been doubly terrifying. She combined forbidden knowledge with forbidden desire. When Onoskelis consults with men in the semblance of a woman, she weaponizes every societal taboo against her own sex. What if we flipped the script for a moment? Imagine Onoskelis not as an avatar of wicked femininity, but as a mirror held up to a society that feared female autonomy. What would her story tell us about our own modern blind spots, about how we still police desire, still cast shame over bodies we don't fully understand? Onoskelis reminds us that every weapon is forged in a particular bias. Sex becomes her tool because it was already feared, already shamed. And in confronting her Solomon, and we are forced to ask, what power do we give those fears? And how might the true sin lie, not in the seduction itself, but in our refusal to acknowledge its deeper meaning? It's no coincidence that Onias and Onoskelis choose feminine guises to ensnare their victims. In the world of the Testament of Solomon, these female forms aren't meant as a blanket indictment of women, but rather as a mirror held up to human frailty, reminding us how easily desire can blind our judgment. Remember how Eve's own choice in Eden became the touchstone for woman as tempter. Genesis 3:6 tells us she saw that the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom. And in a very real sense, Onoskelis and Onias replay that same dynamic. They don't merely use beauty, they weaponize it against the one thing most of us can't refuse. But here's the twist. It isn't just women the text is critiquing, it's the vulnerability in all of us. The demons know that sex and desire cut straight to our core, regardless of gender. By wearing a woman's skin, they exploit a cultural taboo that seductive power belongs to women, while throwing the real spotlight back on male weakness. What if we flipped the script for a moment? Imagine a world where demons appeared as our own shadows, reflecting not gender, but our inner cravings. Would we be any less likely to fall for them? The real lesson might be that temptation transcends flesh and form. It's a universal force, and any mask, a beautiful woman, a trusted friend, even our own ambitions can disguise it. So here's my question for you. If desire is humanity's great equalizer, what mask do you think would tempt you hardest? And how might recognizing that mask help you stand firm when it comes calling? As Onoskelis' shifting form dissolves into the shadows, her final whisper hangs in the air. Every desire untamed becomes a noose of our own making. Remember, this temptation often wears the guise of beauty, and the ugliest snares lie hidden within our deepest yearnings. When you feel that pull, whether in moonlit groves or the quiet corners of your heart, may you stand firm in wisdom, recognizing the serpent beneath the smile. If this descent into the venomous truths of Onoskelis has stirred your soul, please like, share, and subscribe so we can continue to unmask Scripture's darkest figures together. Share in the comments. Where have you felt desire's coil tightening, and how did you break free? May the Lord shield your heart from corrupting whispers, fill you with His discernment, and grant you courage to walk unshackled by unseen phantoms. Until next time, be blessed, stay vigilant, and let His light guide you through every shadow.